All right, everyone. Hello to another DBD Coaches Call. This time we're going to be talking about James Clear's Atomic Habits and specifically looking at externals, how we can influence those externals, how we can influence behavioral change, all through the lens of these atomic habits. We'll start going over kind of like a preview before we get into the 4 laws that are mentioned. And one of the very first things that comes up across the atomic habits is massive action versus 1% improvements. I kind of want to open up there, maybe with the question of what 1% improvements have you all seen or have you focused on recently that have made big returns?
I'm happy to start. I'm trying to simplify this as much as possible, really. Brandon, I think we spoke about this as well, the mindset change in that I changed when I sort of locked in to my session, as it were. I decided it wasn't when I got to the gym. It was the second that I left the house. And it came down to being a little bit more selfish as well. So with my sessions and stuff like that, I stopped talking to people as much. I literally just got on with my session, and I found that actually when I was a little bit more selfish, it paid off so much. I stopped using the gym as social time, and I just really locked in and just thought, actually, I'm really deserving of this, and therefore I should focus on it. And it was a small change to make, but it actually has, my training has soared since then. And actually just taking that the training just that little bit more seriously, and if people come over and talk and just say, I just need you to give me 10 minutes and then I'll come over to you, I have seen huge growth since then.
My kind follows a similar principle with my training. Just put my phone on do not disturb. That way I can just truly lock into that session. But one of the other areas is within my sleep pattern. That's something that I always struggle with, because it's really odd. In the morning, I'm like less active, but as I go into the night, I just get more and more active, and my brain gets just haywire. So sometimes I'm going to bed at like 2 a.m. Not good at all, but working until then. So I think I incorporated this to my last block, but literally getting into bed around 11 p.m. and just being in bed, I got to sleep so much faster. That had a positive impact on my training, especially in the first 3 weeks of the block. And then in the latter end, it kind of slipped, and then old habits come back in. So that's kind of my 1%.
My 1% recently has been getting up earlier. So I'm the complete opposite of Adam. I'm more productive in the morning. So I get up earlier, about 3 to 4 hours before my first client, unless it's like a stupid early first client. And I will do work where I will get social media content edited, posted, or scheduled, or start writing programs and stuff like that. And that has, one, made me more focused for my in-person sessions, actually, where I'm much more like on the ball with a lot of things that just come up within an in-person session, but also freed up my nighttime to be more on hand with my powerlifting clients and athletes, where I can answer their questions much more faster.
I actually don't think I've got a 1% habit change that I'm like making to have like a positive impact on myself right now. Like I've just moved house. I'm still trying to get into a habit of like when I train. Like my days have been really disjointed. I haven't had like a symmetrical week in like the past 2 months, and that's actually really impacting my training. Although I live literally 30 seconds from the gym now, like I now have not necessarily more excuses, but more distractions that like keep me from training because I'm so close to getting home. I'm like, do I put a wash on, or like I've started cooking my meals and stuff during the night, like fresh, instead of making my meal preps. So stuff like that has hugely disjointed my training recently. And I don't think it's necessarily impacting me when I'm there, but it's like impacting getting me there. So actually like watching that video, it's really kind of clarify to me what it is that I like need to change. But I kind of have been aware of it. But again, I'm still like settling in and just trying to figure out, it's like living a whole new life. And I just haven't quite found the right schedule for everything to kind of like fit into place with work and lifting and like home life yet. So I'm trying.
Just to speak to one of the things that I know you do, which is one of the things that drastically changed in the last 3 weeks, was that you started messaging me in sessions with decisions. So like this is something that might actually like play to other people's, the 1% of like in session, even if you're feeling slightly unsure, the messaging coach being like just double checking, because the shift in confidence mid session has been a massive difference.
Literally, I mean, yeah, it makes such a difference. Like, it seems so silly that just asking you, is this right? Can you just have like, even using the community chat for like RP checks and getting that kind of level of reassurance is, yeah. So I find it really, really necessary. But obviously, like within comp prep and stuff, I didn't want to be a massive pain to you, because obviously like your sessions were comp sessions and we know like how much you dial in and stuff. But yeah, that definitely helps.
I was going to add like my own 1% just to show like how shit I am, and the things that have made a monstrous difference is like I leave my creatine next to where I make my coffee in the morning. So because obviously we'll talk about habit stacking and stuff. So like make coffee, take creatine, immediate one. The water bottle that lives on my desk, my water intake per day that wasn't Monster was less than 500 mils. We won't even comment on it. But now it's like 2 liters a day because the bottle lives on my desk. That on my desk in the morning, I'll tear off my to-do list sheet. And so I have to write that before I start work every day. Most of mine are like not big fundamental things that are very flashy. They're just shitty little habits that are, and it obviously goes into all of the things that Atomic Habits talks about, but that the presence of those things stops me doing the next action until I've done that fundamental thing.
I can't think of a 1%, but I think maybe it's because it's only 1% and 1% isn't a huge deal, is it? And I probably do have a bunch of 1%, and I can't even think of a single one right now. Apart from I'm moving house next week and I'm trying to do a box a day, pack a box a day, and that's probably my 1% right now. So yeah, that's probably it for me, but not training related. I can't think of anything training related, but I probably do have something, but because it's so minuscule and it's probably so normal to me now doing it every day that I can't even think of one.
What's
That's
your...
what I hooked up on, is they seek the big change, and that's what is going to facilitate that change. But it's actually the small habits that you consistently do over a period of time that facilitate that. So that might be a case of what you're going through.
I'd love to know what's your morning routine, because I've seen you actually demonstrate it once, but you are what I would call actually like a highly efficient person. And so like you get up at a very early time of day, but you're very organized and it doesn't get seen because it's all those 1%. What is your, like you wake up, what is your morning routine, early morning shift?
Well, if I'm on the early shift, I wake up, I pack my lunch box, which is meal prep that I will have done Monday mornings. Obviously get ready for work, go to work, open up the gym, or before I've opened up the gym, I set my class out, plan my class, plan all my PTs, open up the gym, and then 5 to 7, welcome all the members in, and then do my shift.
Because it's normally the accumulation of all those tiny little things that means that actually nothing ends up being a problem because you do everything in organized rhythm. Anyway,
I feel like you've missed out so many things there. Like for me, this is something like from just listening to that, I'm going to set my alarm earlier tomorrow morning, because at the moment I get up at 7, get ready, get in the shower, do my hair, make my bed, get to work by 7:30. So now I want to start like getting up at 6:30 and having that time to like make a coffee and take my creatine and maybe read a book, or like have that time in the morning to kind of like wake up and function instead of rushing around and then going straight to work.
Yeah, I wake up at
Trying
5
to be more productive
when I start work at 7.
Yeah. Wait, you get up at 5:30?
Yeah,
How long does it take you to get to work?
20 minutes. And I
So
unlock
you spend a whole
5 to 7. So yeah, I do get lots done. Like by the time I get to work at 6:30. But then yeah, when I'm at work, I make sure there's blue cloths, all of the spray bottles are topped up. I make sure all of the toilets are topped up. I make sure the gym is tidy from whoever closed up the night before. Yeah, there's loads of things I do that I probably don't acknowledge that I do. That is literally part of my routine that I do every single day without fail.
I think that's the very thing that speaks most to a habit, is that it is autonomous, right? Like you don't have a list done out where you're like, I need to do this, I need to do this, and it's just become, I do this, right? It's something that just happens anyway. I think it's one of the amazing things about that autonomy is that's where we stand with, like, on the mathematics side of it, where we stand to become 37 times better next year is whenever we internalize these things and it becomes so much of who we are, like every one of our habits and how that changes our behavior. I really love the line, I forget where I heard this, but like behavior is a symptom of character. And that's kind of the video that we watched in the book very much goes into this. But I want to sort of zoom out a little bit and zoom out more so within the long term of like people's powerlifting and the powerlifting career, right? We've got some people who are like Lucy, very well decorated within powerlifting. And the one thing that is spoken about that I really feel people need to hear more about is the valley of disappointment, right? So how we think that that progress is linear, more often than not, it's actually an exponential. And so we start significantly slower. Those small iterative changes that we make are usually ones that go little noticed, if not unnoticed. And that is where that discrepancy is very much highlighted, and that's what James Clear calls the valley of disappointment. I would be really curious, Lucy, in particular in your case, purely off the basis of how well decorated you are as a powerlifter, what would you say that your valley of disappointment was, how that felt at the time, and what was the point for you that you really had that breakthrough into like, okay, well, I have now exceeded my expectations? Or has that happened yet?
I don't think I've ever exceeded my own expectations because I'm like, I haven't met my goal yet. Like, I haven't got there, but I've definitely hit like the valley. Like, I got to a point where it wasn't even just like the numbers. I just like internally didn't feel stronger anymore. And that's when like my habits started to change. Like, it hasn't been until it was at that point that I started to like look more into nutrition and supplements, and then started kind of adopting better habits and a better way of living, basically, because before that I wasn't even tracking my macros. So yeah, I kind of did what I could at kind of a very, what I would say, like athletically novice level, even though I was still like at a higher enough standard to be competing internationally. As like a typical athlete, I wasn't where I should have been. So it was at that point that I started working with Callum. I started kind of taking things seriously. And then that's when I started to implement those 1%. But no, I don't think I've ever exceeded my own expectations because I haven't got there yet.
I think that speaks a great deal to like one of the things that's mentioned within it, and that is like the 3 different levels. So there's outcomes, there's processes, and there's identity. And you can kind of enter at any different phase of that, right? I think most of the time when we think about this linear progression, we're very much linearly thinking about the outcomes, right? So we're thinking about, oh, well, when I total my next 100-kilo mark, I'll be happy, or when I squat my next rep, I'll be happy, or when I do whatever, right, I'll be happy. And those are all very outcomes based, rather than it being like, I can call myself this because I do this, and that there is a stack of evidence to suggest that you are the person that you say you are, right? I think that's an absolutely huge thing. Like, it's spoken about so much, particularly within like areas of therapy with there's like ACT, CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy, all these different things where you can very directly influence your belief of self based off of your behavior, right? And it's very much that builds that character. Again, like going back to that same point of behavior being a symptom of character. One of the very first laws that's spoken about is making it obvious, right? I'm gonna have anyone basically jump in on any one of these points, but I'll read out the points that stuck out to me most, and I'd like to kind of have a bit of a discussion about. There was the habit scorecard, time and location, so I will behavior at time in location, habit stacking, triggers, and then environment versus motivation. Any one of you can jump in on this, but particularly the one that spoke to you the most.
Habit stacking, 100%. And this is something that I've used really effectively with my clients as well. So usually when people come to you, they come to you with a list of things they'd like to change. And then they just go, help me with A, B, C, D, and E. And I'm just like, why don't we start with A? And that to them just seems so illogical, because what about all the other things? And explaining to those people that actually, once we make this habit just everyday life, and it's just something that you don't even think about, that you're going to add the next thing, and you break it down, it works really, really well. But because people are impatient, like you said before, they see the end goal and they don't see all of those milestones and those stops along the way. They're so desperate to grab the end result that they don't understand all of the processes that happen in between. And I absolutely love habit stacking. It's something that I have done a lot for myself, that every time I get impatient, I think, actually, how could I break this down, and how can I take stepping stones to reach where I want to get to, because that's not achievable for me at the moment. So in a lot of examples where I wouldn't have given up, I introduced habit stacking instead and said, actually, here's the first step. Why don't we master this? And then we'll think about the next step. And it's much more mentally digestible for a lot of people, rather than just saying, we've got a big goal, it's in a year's time, I'll see you in a year. It's like, hey, why don't we do this? And our goal will be 3 weeks.
I quite like habit stacking as well. I use this a lot with my athletes, is the pyramid scheme. So it's pretty much the same principle. But if we take, say, like a powerlifting direct example, is that top block of the pyramid is, let's say, your comp single, and the rest of the blocks are what build that single. And often you have to pull back from that top block. So that top block is that big overseeing goal. And a lot of the time I find myself pulling back the athletes to meet the foundations of that pyramid and build up from there. So that's what I really like about the habit stacking. And that's how I use it with my athletes. If there's blocks missing at the bottom, that pyramid is going to crumble down. Or in this case, let's say the squat. So that's why I quite like.
I think it feeds nicely back into what Lucy was saying as well, where she sort of thought about like her nutrition and stuff like that as well. And 9 times out of 10 people come to you with the overall picture of what they want to look like as an athlete, and that is mastering the sleep and the nutrition and everything else. And I'm just like, what is most realistic to you right now? Is that training twice a week? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, why don't we just start there? And like I said, it can sound crazy, because they're just like, but what about the food? And I'm like, forget the food. The food will come later. So yeah, it's like, what is achievable now? Just start there.
I can talk to the like basic habits that, both as an athlete myself and things that I've like proposed to other athletes of. So just the simple shit. I'm going to go to the gym, which means pre-gym, this is the meal I have before I train. So that covers carbs. When I'm going to the gym, I listen to X music, and the idea of that music is bring me into the mental state for it. When I arrive at the gym, the first thing I do is this band comes out my bag first, so I do this warm up. When my shoes go on when I'm doing X warm-ups. When I do the bar, the next thing goes on is wrist wraps, and that's the next. It's just the order of event of every single thing that should happen. And I think most people, the grin on Lucy's face is like, it's terrifying. Which part of that's resonated?
So I had this conversation with one of my guys the other day, because he was in the gym when I got there, and normally I train by myself. And when I get there, I put my bag in the same spot. I take my shoes off and put them in exactly the same spot. If I have a jumper, it stays on until like the exact same set every time. I then grab the plate from the same place every time. And if it's not on the same place, it really annoys me. I do the exact same warm up every single session. My feet go in the exact same spot when I do my body weight squats. And I'm just so regimented into like, this is the way that I warm up. This is the way that I train. This is how I get into the mental state. Whether you want to be there or not, it takes me like less than 5 minutes to be there and present, even if I didn't like switch on when I turned up. And we used to joke that it was like, is it like an OCD thing? Is it like, are we all slightly like, you know, everyone's slightly autistic because everyone's got to be on the scale somewhere? Like, is it that? But actually, it's just a habit. It's just something that we've done since we got there. And it's just from the first day that I trained in that environment, is what I did. And whether that session clearly went well, because it's just been replicated every single time. So I just think it's like really funny that actually I'm not the only person that does this. And this is just, it's just a habit. It's normal.
I think a lot of us have those habits, but it might be a case that they just don't realize it.
Brandon, your quotes. What's the quote around excellence?
Excellence or
habits and excellence. It's something like excellence isn't a character trait. It's a like list of habits, something like that.
Oh,
it's just,
yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so like it's just in essence that like you'll never meet a high performer that doesn't have a list of habits. They won't be aware of them, like Alice was saying, because they'll be like, no, I just do those things. That's just what I do. But like their baseline of habits, because they're so inherent, is what makes them exceptional. Like when you watch people in the warm-up room at IPF Worlds, they didn't turn up and go, oh, how shall I warm up today? That's the routine that they've built over time. They didn't go like, what music am I going to listen to? They built that playlist a while back. And so it's just those things I think are what make athletes exceptional. It's just by the time they are exceptional, they don't even realize they're doing it.
There's two Alex Hormozy quotes that I want to bring into this because I think they both really resonate very, very well with what we're talking about. One of the first ones is that the definition of exception. To be exceptional, by definition, is to be abnormal. Therefore, you will not be normal to normal people. So the other one in conjunction with that is that if you appear as obsessed, that's likely a good marker of progress. Right. Very typically, like, again, to do those abnormal things, and this is talking very specifically within the realm of powerlifting now. There are so often, I've posted about this at some point, where like you'll be moving furniture for someone, or you'll be lifting something heavy or moving something around, and some wee old woman will go, oh, there's your workout for today, son. And I'll go, no, actually, I'm going to go and lift heavy circles later. But like and there's so many people, to be fair, who, you know, I like to talk about like negotiables and non-negotiables, and there's kind of two different ways that you can perceive this, right? For me, like I will always, it's kind of a granted that I will always turn up to the gym, right? On the days that I am training, I will always make sure that I train on those days. The entire series of events that happens after that, granted, is also assured, but that's been built up through muscle memory. For the majority of people, or for people who are like starting to get into the gym, it's very much a negotiable of like, you know, should I go today? It's after work, or, you know, work was tiring today, and that sort of stuff. Not to say that like we are not dealing with human beings. We absolutely are. But I think that's one of the big things that separates those who go exceptionally far and those who really struggle to get started, is that they're like, you can either see it as a non-negotiable. So I will not negotiate with myself whether I go to the gym today. I will go in and train. Or you can, and I quite like turning this whole thing on its head, because we like to talk about non-negotiables. I like to turn this whole thing on its head and be like, no, actually, you negotiate with yourself every single day. You just need to make sure that you win that negotiation. So that brings the power back into the athlete's hand. Of instead of going, oh, you know, I have to do this now. You know, this is a non-negotiable. I have to do this now. It's like, no, you walked through the doors and you won the argument. You won the negotiation. Now you're here and you have the sense of conviction behind you to back that. So how the session goes is now entirely in your own hands, and you are, irrespective of how your day went, you're now able to make a really, or you stand with the opportunity to make a very, very good positive change out of it. I kind of want to move through this first law of make it obvious and go into the second one of make it attractive. The four main ones that came up with that is dopamine spikes, temptation bundling, group influence, and then enjoying hard habits. I want to talk about the last two in particular, group influence and enjoying hard habits. What have we had any personal experience, or what do we think with this?
Is the group influence one like who you're training with? I definitely feel like that resonates with me. Changing my, well, kind of goes into one of the other pillars, the environment, changing my environment, training with people stronger than me, training with people like Callum, Rachel. That definitely helped my mindset and how I viewed myself as an athlete. Yeah.
I'm actually going to out myself and a different coach who I'm really close with, who both of us very deliberately do not train at the same time as athletes the vast majority of the time, as in with our own athletes. Not necessarily because we feel that those are bad influences. There is kind of like a natural coach-athlete relationship that when you have the standard that all of us as DBD coaches have, which is being on hand with athletes during their sessions, you find yourself being present to do your own training and being like physically there, which usually leads to significantly more communication than what is probably effective and needed, right? So I'll out myself in saying that something that I have done recently among group influence, very selfishly, fully admitted, I'm sorry to all my athletes who are watching this, is I just started training early at a time that most of them can't train, right? Knowing the goals that I have, knowing the processes that I need to subscribe to in order to make those goals happen, this was one of the things where I was like, okay, I can be a better coach and a better athlete in doing this. And for the of you who for the athletes out there who don't get to train along their coach, or for whatever reason your coach might not want to train alongside you, it's probably nothing personal. It's more than likely just that they know that that's what's going to end up happening. It'll become like a one-on-one in-person coaching session as opposed to their training and your training at the same time.
I'm just gonna add for some of the the environment stuff as well. So not only the people that you train with, but the literal sense of the environment of what type of gym you're in. So I obviously have a studio where I can train completely on my own. I'm so uninspired because I'm training in an office. I like it just that does not cultivate the sort of environment I want to be around. The only thing I was gonna not necessarily push back on, but kind of shift the framing of what you just said was, it's not just because we don't want to train with you because we know what will happen, it's because we genuinely care too much and we will put you before ourselves. And it's a really shitty thing. Like there's everyone in this chat I have trained with. So I don't think I've trained with Adam ever. Never will. I've trained with probably everyone.
You mentioned coming to my gym in the early stages, but then it's just
change my fucking mind, mate. Leave me alone.
But
who
I am.
I just swore I've got it demonetized again. But I've trained with everyone here, and so if I train with Alice, I try so hard, but I genuinely want to see her do better more than I wanted to see myself do well. So actually, there's certain environments where I will not train around people I want to train with because I'm more invested as a coach in other people doing well. But also say being in a gym just where people are taking their own shit seriously, they can flat out ignore me, but that alone shifts the attitude. The community thing I wanted to very briefly speak to, DBD was the aim of that. So when I started out in training in the initial stages, I trained completely alone with no one who shared the values or really got what I was doing. By proxy of having 300 athletes around you sharing the same goal, you can't be anything but inherently more driven towards it. What was the other community element I was going to speak on? Oh, and the last thing was, this doesn't speak directly to it, but it is one of the other points, is that we call people athletes. And it's very intentional. I know we've spoken to Brandon about why we wouldn't use the word client as opposed to athlete, but also by proxy is being called an athlete, wearing a t-shirt that says athlete on the back. You do feel like you have to show up. You do feel like that becomes identity, which helps the formation of habit.
I actually had that conversation yesterday. So I went to the public gym for the first time since I can remember yesterday. It's challenging because it was in my old workplace, so I had a fair few people come up to talk to me, so it distracted me from the work I was needed to do, and I found out, or essentially I picked up a client from just being there. But we had a conversation about being an athlete, and I kind of realized it myself when I was talking to him. I kept referring to athlete as a label, and it kind of like assumes that person is like competitive within a sport. And I kind of like explained how it's more of a demeanor that I'm after from an athlete and the principles we go by. So we're more competitive towards ourselves. We don't have to be within a sport or doing competitions to be classed as an athlete. So that's what I picked up on.
What was the other one? Because it said community. What was the second one you wanted to draw on?
Enjoying hard habits. I was just gonna come in and talk about this. The two things that immediately came up to me, you can think whatever you want of me because of this. The two things that immediately came into my mind whenever I heard this section of it was like the runner's high, or the effect of the runner's high, and then immediately off the back of that, David Goggins, right? Irrespective of what you think of that man, okay? Who's gonna carry the boat? I genuinely think right now, not to be, I don't think you should be listening to David Goggins all the time whenever you're working out, right? If you really need to get into a special place, that might be the place that you turn to, right? But I do legitimately think that there is an awful lot to be said about enjoying the parts of this that suck, right? It's really simple to track your calories, like MacroFactor, fantastic app. MyFitnessPal, also a really good one. Like, there is so much stuff where on principle it's super, super simple, but why is it then so difficult, right? It's not complex. It's very simple. It's relatively easy to do in principle, but it's so, so hard at the same time. There's so many other things, like getting 8 hours of sleep on paper, really simple thing to do. In practice, way harder, right? There's so many things like that where I almost like to gear it towards like, yes, this sucks. What a fantastic thing. Another thing that Hormozy talks about is, he says, like, whenever it is really, really difficult, to almost have the thought of like, thank goodness, because who on earth is going to want to follow me, right? Like, who's going to want to subscribe to this much suffering, to this much difficulty, to this much whatever, right? And I think there is immense power in that for an athlete, like on the athletic level. I'm actually like not even talking about anything about coaching, specifically about athletes. There is so much, like, I love the phrase like leaving no stone unturned. There's so much that comes into that where, like, yeah, it's gonna suck. It's supposed to suck. That's a fantastic marker of progress.
Kobe speaks to this a lot. And like, I won't bastardize any of the quotes because I cannot remember for the life of me. But I know they're talking about a training day where he came in, he'd been there for a number of hours. The other guy turns up, the other guy sees him training, and they're like 3 hours in or whatever. And then the other guy's like, "Are you gonna leave?" And it's like, "Not till you're gone." And the whole thing is just being like I for years drew on the same thing, which I'm weak at now, but I think it was one of those powerful things. Was I didn't care about the whole outworking people. I was like, "You will not outsuffer me," and that was like the most potent thing of being like, this is difficult. The getting up early is hard. They're doing the training for longer, pushing harder. That's already hard. And you cannot follow me. And then that's when hearing Alex Hormozy say it was like, it felt just like really powerful to have someone resonate with the same principle. I hate the relationship people have with suffering and pain, or I'm like, it's so stigmatized. But the thing I was writing is like, we always relate comfort to complacency. Well, the opposite has to be pain for movement. Like you're not going to get anywhere through comfort. They're too tightly correlated to one another. So like I wrote out on my story the other day something about like seeking suffering, which was like, where is the next path of most resistance? Like, what is the hardest thing to do next?
There's no growth in the comfort zone. There's no comfort in the growth zone. Really, really powerful principle.
Callum, you
recently,
said to me earlier that the last time I was uncomfortable, loads of greatness came after.
I've
So-
definitely seen it. Sorry,
Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say in my own training recently, like Callum was saying, like that sort of suffering and that discomfort, like knowing the set that comes next because I didn't hit the RPE is going to have to be heavier. Whereas before I'd maybe put it off. I'd be like, I'll do it next week. I'll put it in my program and I'll put the weight up next week. And now it's like I almost look forward to, you know, that kind of having to work harder. And I was doing split squats the other day and I was like, not sure that was the right intensity. And I was just like, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add 10 kilos because I'm going to make sure that was the right intensity. And that set sucked. And do you know what? I felt sick. I felt really dizzy. And when I sat on the floor, I felt grateful for those things because I was just like, that was it. That was it. And it sounds insane because people were just like, why were you happy that you felt sick? Why were you happy that you felt dizzy? And I was like, because I did it and I found it and I'll do it again.
I wanted to bring it just to what Alice was saying, because obviously like we're tying this so tightly to powerlifting, but just because it is such a good principle of like the best parts of your life are almost always on the other side of something really uncomfortable. And so like I'm very fortunate to have known Alice for a really long time, and like through everything I have always almost somewhat intentionally put her in moments of severe discomfort, if it's public speaking or a job she's not ready for necessarily, or like taking on teaching people things can do. And it was this, like every time it was the new most stressful thing you had done, and then every time afterwards became monstrously more capable. And we were talking about at the moment a level of difficulty of being like, this is uncomfortable, and I was like, good, because if it was comfortable you wouldn't change, and if it isn't this, how much harder does it have to be for you to then want to change? And I'll tie it into one other person of Lucy, when we're talking about this, like the Valley of the what the fucking term is, I don't care. Post nationals, she went, that fucking sucked, and everyone else can talk about best lifter and so on, and it was heartbreak, genuinely heartbreaking moment. And the thing we spoke about afterwards was, thank God it was that bad, because it will never be that bad again. And I think people need to have the relationship of like, if it is bad now, be fortunate it will never be that bad again. I'll shut up again.
It's so funny because, like, Brandon, you said, like, your non-negotiable is that you turn up. But actually, sometimes the hardest thing is getting up and going. And once you're there and you've done your 5 minutes of habits, and then you leave, and then you get what Cheryl thought was, like, that relief, that, like, sense of achievement, that the hardest part of doing your session was actually just getting there. Like, I can literally see the gym from my bedroom, but I'm sat here, I'm so comfortable. And actually, like, obviously I want to go, and I would just feel shame and guilt if I didn't. And it would, like, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I hadn't done my session. But actually, sometimes I just, like, I'm not in that mindset. And actually getting there is the hardest thing, because once I'm there, I know what I'm doing and I love what I'm doing and I get through it. But it's like, yeah, it's a non-negotiable, but sometimes, like, yeah, like you said, like, you do have to negotiate with yourself. And actually, like, it's okay to not always win. You know, if you're feeling the DOMs from a really heavy deadlift session, it's okay to actually say, I need one more day. You know, there are 7 days in the week. Most of us don't train more than 4, but it's okay to not do it on the day that you're meant to. Like, that's not an unreal expectation. I think that's something that, like, I've really been battling with recently, is that, like, my normal structure has changed and I can be more adaptive because I've got the ability to go. So maybe I'm making more excuses for, like, myself, but actually I'm not making excuses because I'm going, like, the times that I should be going. But I think some people get so wrapped up into, like, I have to go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But actually, if you gave yourself a day between Monday, didn't train that Tuesday, but then you went on that Wednesday, you'd actually be better off for it. But people are sometimes so, like, stuck in that, like, I have to go, I have to go, I have to go. But actually, it is okay to give yourself that time. I think that's not really, sometimes that's just not accepted enough.
I think this is a part where there's a great deal of nuance that comes into this, and someone who talks really, really well on that is Jason Tremblay from TSG. And one of the things that he says is do not force a training day if you are very low readiness, right? So if you have been hyper stressed, underslept, dehydrated, like no poor nutrition, haven't had your pre-workout, like don't. Granted, you have your time and your ability to like schedule those things out, and there are going to be sessions where you're kind of teetering on that line of like, am I just ready enough to be able to train and get the minimum effective dose in, or am I not ready enough and it's okay to postpone this and then actually have like know that I can focus on my readiness in a different day and actually get in. The last two laws, and I kind of want to summarize both of these in the interest of time, is law 3 is make it easy and law 4 is make it satisfying, which sounds very conflicting against what we've just said, right? To the point of make it easy, I would actually probably still argue the same point. Very, very recently, on the Modern Wisdom podcast, I can't remember whether it was, I think it might have been Chris that said it, but he was talking about the goal. So if you set a goal for yourself and you're not willing to pay the price of the process, which is exactly what this entire book covers, let go of the goal. It would make it very, very easy for you if you can set a goal and you can look at the process and you go, yeah, I'd pay that. Well, that's just made it the easiest decision because now you get to pay that, right? It is very like clear cut yes or no whenever you look at a goal. And so if you look at a goal and you look at the process and you go, I don't know if I would do that, drop the goal a little bit. Look at that process, go, would I do that? I might be more inclined to do that. Make it something that you are 100% on. Like I would definitely subscribe to this process. And that is the part that makes it easy, right? In my personal opinion, I think a lot of our goal setting matters, but it's more so the process that is invoked that comes off of the back of it. It's what you do, it's who you become, it's the behavior that is actually changed within you in order to achieve that goal and the time frame across which you're willing to do it. Like for any one of us, if we set a goal for the end of the year, right? Very frequently there's like December competitions. If you set a goal for yourself in December that I will compete in December and I will do this, you have a process that you must now subscribe to for 6 months if that is the thing that you want to get, right? And so I think there's a lot of power in that. That is one of the big things that does make it so easy. And I think the other thing that makes it, again, law 4, that makes it so satisfying is that you can live your life knowing that you legitimately did everything that you could. Like you don't have to have that regret of, what if I tried harder, or what if I logged my calories, or what if I did some more mobility or got some more steps in more consistently? You don't have to live with that regret because you will know that you've put so much towards it in order to complete that. What are some of your guys' thoughts surrounding those two?
I'm just gonna jump in with the subscribe to the process of like what that you and I just listened to a podcast and it speaks to like release yourself from desire, right? And like I maybe want to spin it on its head, but the idea being like if you set a goal and the journey between where you're at and that goal actually doesn't seem like something you want to do, you need to learn to release yourself from that desire. The format of that is a separate conversation. But I think the opposition of like when someone sets a goal, let's say someone signs up to be an athlete and they're like, I want to be the best in the world. I'm like, cool. Where do you want to be in 6 months? And they're like, in 6 months, I want to be better. I'm like, well, better just looks like this. And so like trying to prescribe a journey suitable to where you're at. And so when we're saying like make it attractive or make it easy, of being like maybe the goal initially was just too aggressive. And it's not to say you cannot be the best in the world, but day one to be the best in the world is the scariest process because like the best in the world doesn't give up a day, but the better than today just goes, well, what's your 1% tomorrow? And so like maybe it's just addressing not necessarily that your goal is wrong, but that you're not setting goals close enough, that it's a really simplistic change of being like, so like me right now, I want to be stronger. Well, I sure as shit, as Brandon has pointed out to me, need to stop eating like a child. I mean, like, that's not a scary process. In fact, I get to eat good food. This is going to be fun. You're not wrong. And I think a lot of the time it's like you say, the idea of making it look easy or making it satisfying as a journey normally seems ridiculous because we set massive goals. It's just identifying some of them and making a really pretty route of going, I have to walk the walk, and walking the walk means I train 4 or 3 days a week, and I do that with intent and predominantly just my SBD stuff. I can even get away with my accessory work not being phenomenal because I will still be better. And then if I want to be better than that, then you have the next little journey. And so rather than looking as I'm going from here to the top of a mountain and being like, you're going from here to the top of that hill. And once we're at the top of that hill, we'll talk about the next bit of the mountain, and kind of separating some of that route.
I think sorry, I was just going to say, like, it just reminded me, like, one of my favorite ways of saying to people is like, when they're struggling to do anything, is like, just do one tiny thing at a time. And if that's go put your shoes on and then decide that you actually don't want to go to the gym, then don't go to the gym. If you put your shoes on and go to your car and then decide you don't want to go to the gym, don't go to the gym. If you start the engine after that and then decide you don't want to go, but the chain of events, chances are that once they start it, they will complete it. And someone once said to me, and I actually really like it, is that a marathon is just lots of little steps. That's all it is. So just what Callum was saying is, instead of going, I want to run a marathon, it's just like, why don't we go for a walk? You know, and it's just breaking it down and seeing it for what it really is, like, and appreciating the work that goes into it, but also how easy it can be.
I think there is so much of people's behavior and people's character that you can actually influence. You know, a lot of people, and like you as an athlete, like, you can influence your own character, you can influence your own behavior. I think so many people are so willing to accept, well, I am the way that I am. Yeah. And if you're not happy about it, or like, I think back to periods where people have suffered from depression. And one of the hardest things for people with any form of mental illness to hear is people saying to them, oh, you're fine. Like, it's okay, you're fine. Is this fine? Is this really where the bar is? Is this fine? Right? And if you're unhappy with where you're at, you can continue to tell yourself it's fine, and that is okay. But I know that if we extrapolate this out and we take it into the most extreme cases, that is oftentimes one of the hardest things to hear. If you are genuinely unhappy, you do have a great deal of power and a great deal of control to be able to manipulate your behavior, to be able to manipulate your character, and then thereby to be able to manipulate your identity, who it is that you actually are, who you think of yourself, how you think of yourself, how others perceive you, and the reality of that down to its very core, who you are as a person. There's a lot of good stuff that every one of you have spoken about, and I really appreciate all of your comments. Seriously, I think one of the big things is to just take this right down to the level of the athlete. Who do we make these podcasts for? Who do we go onto these coaches calls for? It's for the athletes, right? That's one of the biggest things, of knowing that you have far more control than you think. You have far more power than you think. You're way more capable than you believe. Sometimes you just need to get uncomfortable. Sometimes you need to get a bit more stressed. Sometimes you need to really work that same muscle so that you know that you have the capacity to do that. And the hardest thing that you've ever done is the hardest thing that you've ever done. You've probably survived that already. And so there's so much that you can do that's related to powerlifting that you are more than equipped enough. It literally, in my opinion, takes the courage to say, I will try. One of the biggest things.